The title of this conference is Middle Eastern Spirituality and Peace, and it occurred to me that these two words, spirituality and peace, could be said to sum up the whole of the Baha'i message, because Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, which is a religion that was founded about 150 years ago, Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, says that the light of religion, the light of spirituality, is dying out in every land, and he considered his mission to be to rekindle that light and to point out the pathways of reunion with the beloved, with God. And on the other hand, Baha'u'llah also says that he has come, and this is an exact quote from the words of Baha'u'llah, he has come to unite and weld together all that dwell on earth. And he writes about his ultimate goal as being to bring about what he calls, first of all, the lesser peace, and eventually the most great peace. So these two words, spirituality and peace, can be said to sum up the mission of Baha'u'llah. And if we study the writings of Baha'u'llah, we find that these two are not separate goals, but rather a single, intertwined and interdependent goal. So what people imagine are two things that are very far apart and divergent, the rather passive and individually centered activity that's conjured up by the word spirituality, and the socially active role needed to bring about peace, turn out in the system devised by Baha'u'llah, the way devised by Baha'u'llah, to be merely two poles of the same general process. And so what I want to do is to describe this overall process and to demonstrate how peace and spirituality form this interconnected unity within the Baha'i faith. Peace in its social meaning, of course peace has a sort of inward meaning of the person who's inwardly at peace with himself or herself, but this is in any case almost synonymous with spirituality. I'm going to use the word peace in its more social meaning of peace in society, having a peaceful society or a peaceful world. Peace in this outward social meaning, if it is to endure, can't be forced down people's throats. It can't be forced on people in a sort of purely political process of being imposed from on top. There are some prerequisites which, if they're not met, mean that any peace would just be temporary. Unless you have these prerequisites for peace, the peace that you get won't be an enduring peace. And Baha'u'llah says that the first and foremost requirement for peace is justice. If individuals in any society or in the world as a whole don't feel a sense of justice prevailing, then they're going to be discontent, and that will eventually break out in the form of violence in one form or another. War, civil unrest, or terrorism. A second and related requirement that the Baha'i teachings say is necessary for peace is that all forms of prejudice must be eliminated, not just legally in the form of laws, but also from people's minds. Through education, we must make it clear that all humanity is one, and we must try to eliminate racial prejudice, ethnic prejudices, religious prejudices, gender prejudices, and class prejudices. As long as these prejudices exist, a potential for social unrest exists, and therefore peace can't truly come about. A third requirement is that strong foundations must be laid for peace through universal education. That as long as some people in the world are poorly educated, this in itself will produce a situation of injustice and prejudice and all these other things. So Baha'u'llah in his writings places a great deal of importance on education. And a fourth requirement in the Baha'i teachings for peace, a fourth requirement for peace, is the elevation of the social role of women. If women play a more active role in society, the chances of war will be diminished. And there are several other teachings that I could go into, but through lack of time, I'm going to now turn to the more, in a sense, the all-important question is, that given that these are the goals, that we want to achieve these aims, how do we go about it? How are we going to achieve them in a world where the exact opposite of these goals appears to be fairly firmly entrenched in many societies? How do we bring about lack of prejudice? How do we bring in an elevation of the role of women? How do we bring about justice? And Baha'u'llah doesn't just give these social teachings as an ideal to aim for. He's also brought into being a community that can embody these ideals, that can, in effect, demonstrate that they are a practical reality. They aren't just dreams, or they aren't just hopes. And so what I want to do is to talk a little bit about how Baha'u'llah envisages bringing into being a community, which in effect is what Baha'is are trying to do in their communities. The sort of foundations for a society that can bring these aspirations into reality. If we look at our own present-day society, to get things done in our present-day society requires access to the political process, which in turn requires, if we're going to get access to political power, requires a great deal of aggressiveness and competitiveness and so on. And this in turn means that those who feel aggrieved and feel they've not been treated fairly feel that they must try to push their case forward by aggressive means, which, if their frustration reaches a high enough pitch, will eventually result in civil unrest or terrorism, or in any case a lack of peace in society. This aggressiveness and competitiveness is a result of the fact that our societies are structured in a sort of hierarchical way, with all power and wealth being in the hands of a comparatively small number of people, usually men, at the top of the hierarchy. And those that are most aggressive and competitive are the ones who manage to get to the top of that hierarchy. Little wonder then that when you structure society in such a way that it is hierarchical and that it requires aggressiveness and competitiveness to get to the top, what you have on the world scene is a lot of inequality, because that's what hierarchy inevitably means, and a lot of aggression and competitiveness. So that's what we see on the world stage. What the Baha'i scriptures and Baha'i teachings present us with is another model of society, one that does not result in a hierarchy of power, one where power rests not with individuals, but with consultative bodies composed of individuals who have been elected by means that don't encourage competitiveness and power. I don't have details to go into all the details of how these bodies are elected and how they function, except to bring out one crucial fact, and that is that the decisions that are made by these bodies are made through a consultative process. And unfortunately the word consultation has been brought into disrepute in our present day system, because a lot of lip service is paid to consultation when nothing of the sort is going on. But if we have a true consultative process, the sort of consultative process that the Baha'i teachings envisage, the aim of that process involves trying to benefit from the wisdom of the whole group. So that rather than our present hierarchical structures that are whereby a single individual or a powerful faction of society can impose its will on the rest, you have a mechanism whereby you actually try to draw out from all elements of society their ideas. So through such mechanisms, women, racial minorities, the lower social classes, and other groups who do not normally get a say in society can participate and have a genuine input. And it means that decisions are made that the decisions that are made through such a process are more genuinely the result of the input of all. And this in itself can both reduce the grievances of those who feel excluded from society, and also result in decisions that everyone feels part of, and therefore everyone feels that they can support and everyone wants to take forward. So as I say, that's just one element of the sort of mechanisms that Baha'u'llah says are necessary to bring into society so as to remove this sort of hierarchical structure and get everyone involved in the decision making, in the consultative process, and to therefore result in societies that are more egalitarian, more equal, where people don't feel excluded, where people don't feel alienated, and all the results that come from people feeling excluded and alienated, but feel involved in a genuine consultative process, not the farce that goes on at present under the name of consultation. And this is what Baha'i communities all around the world are trying to do at the present time, to bring these sorts of societies into being in their communities. Baha'u'llah has also laid out practical plans for bringing about peace at the international level. He has stated that just as the world is now one place technologically, financially, and in relation to business and most other spheres of life, we have as a reality what's been called the global village. But the only area that we're lacking in this sort of global picture is in the instruments of law and government. So these have also got to now ascend to this global level. And if we fail to do this, then what will continue to happen is that the stronger nations of the world will continue to dominate the weaker ones. The richer countries will set up conditions to keep themselves rich at the expense of the poorer nations. And many undesirable activities such as drug trafficking, people trafficking, or the ability of international companies to move from place to place so as to avoid taxes and safety regulations will continue, and will continue even to get worse. So what Baha'u'llah says is that we've got to, as it were, move to a new phase of humanity's life on this planet, which is the global phase, and that has inevitably got to involve a certain degree of global government, so that all of these things can be governed properly, so that the nations we won't have the stronger nations dominating the weaker ones, and so forth. But I'm not going to dwell on those aspects of Baha'u'llah's teachings, but rather on another aspect which is more directly connected with our theme of spirituality and peace. What I want to do is to go on to consider the question of what all of these sort of social principles, such as the social teachings of justice, freedom of prejudice, equality of men and women, creation of communities that are less hierarchical and less based on domination by individuals or small cliques. What has all of this got to do with spirituality? Many people have the impression that spirituality is sitting around praying and meditating and achieving higher states of consciousness. According to many of the spiritual disciplines and mystical pathways that exist in the world, the best way to achieve spiritual progress is to cut oneself off from the world and to pray or carry out various spiritual exercises either by oneself or in a small group. And the world is seen as a distraction from achieving spirituality, that you must cut yourself off from the world if you want to progress spiritually. Because it is a distraction, because it pulls you away from the task of spiritualizing yourself. The Baha'i position, on the other hand, is that although it's true to say that prayer and meditation are part of achieving spirituality, but if that is all that there is, then it is not a true spirituality that's gained at the end of the road. Spirituality, according to Baha'u'llah, is the acquiring of spiritual or heavenly attributes, the attributes of God. So spirituality is acquiring such attributes as being loving, just, patient, tolerant, truthful, and so on. The list of such attributes is very long. So spirituality, if it's true spirituality, must result in action, in a person who acts in the world in a positive, constructive way that brings people together and is conducive to peace in society. Not only must spirituality result in a transformed person, someone who is a positive, constructive influence in the world, not only someone who, something that is true, which is the position of many of the spiritual disciplines of the world. They all agree about the fact that spirituality must lead to some sort of transformation. Not only must spirituality result in such a transformed person, but also, according to the Baha'i teaching, true spirituality is best developed and perfected by engaging in the world. In other words, that it's only really by engaging in the world that you can show these qualities of love and justice and patience and tolerance and truthfulness and so on. That it's all very well and very easy to believe that I've achieved a very high spiritual state when I'm all alone by myself or in a small group of like-minded people who are similarly engaged in meditating and praying. But I can really only assess myself and try to and find out if I really have become more loving, more patient, and so on, if I go out and participate in society and try to serve others, and thus come into contact with people who are very unlike myself, people who will really test whether I truly have become more loving, more patient, and more just, and so on. So what the Baha'i faith really sees the world as is as a classroom which God has sort of laid out for us, and which can become the field, the place where we test ourselves, where we can show these attributes of love and justice and truthfulness and tolerance and patience and so on. And not only can it teach us these attributes, but we can also test ourselves and see through participating in the world, particularly in the area of service, how tolerant, how loving, how patient we have become. And Baha'is in particular are trying to build up communities which are, if you like, the optimum environment for such spiritual progress. In the Baha'i community, the first thing that should be said is that mysticism and spirituality are not the preserve of a particular small group of the community. In the Baha'i faith, they are the very center of spiritual life, the very center of religious life of every Baha'i in their community and in their individual life. There is no separate group of Baha'i mystics who are sort of off to one side, marginalized and practicing mysticism. Mysticism is at the center of the Baha'i community, and spirituality is if you like, the central focus. And there are various features of Baha'i community life that allow it to function as a supportive environment for spiritual development and the mystical life. The first is that most community activity is carried out in an environment of prayer and devotion. The second is that individual members of the community are encouraged to interact with each other in such a way as to promote love and unity. Another aspect is the fact that Baha'u'llah prohibits backbiting in the community, since he says it quenches the light of the heart and extinguishes the light of the soul. And there are lots of other of these aspects of how the community is encouraged to act and behave in such a way as to set up a community that is as encouraging and as encouraging an environment as possible for the development of spirituality. And another point that I want to go back to, a point I made just previously, is the fact that if I want to find out how spiritual I am, the best way to do so is to participate in society and serve others, particularly people who are unlike myself. And Baha'i communities are deliberately as varied as possible. Baha'is go out of their way to bring into their communities all of the different racial minorities, ethnic groups, and social classes that exist in their communities. And the resultant community thus offers ample opportunities to interact with people who are very different to myself, people who I would not normally choose as my friends, as thus to find out whether I've truly achieved these qualities of love and patience and justice and tolerance and so on. And all of this, of course, in this environment that is focused on love and unity, so that although there is this tendency to have conflict because you're bringing in people from all sorts of different backgrounds and cultures and communities, you're bringing them all into this space, and there's a conflict, there's a potential for conflict because of that. But through having this community that's in a sense focused on unity and love and spirituality, you overcome these differences, you overcome your cultural differences, you overcome class differences, you overcome ethnic and racial differences, and in that way all together grow spiritually. And lastly, as I said, there's a great emphasis in the Baha'i scriptures on the importance of service, that the pathway to true spirituality is through being of service to others. When Abdul Baha, who is the son of Baha'u'llah, was listing the ways of attaining spirituality, of drawing nearer to God, he wrote, "Therefore we learn that nearness to God is possible through," and these are the things that he lists, "devotion to Him, to God, through entrance into the kingdom and service to humanity," so service to humanity, "is attained by unity with mankind and loving kindness to all, is dependent on investigation of the truth," in other words, that we all have the responsibility to investigate truth for ourselves and not just to follow what other people say, "is through acquisition of praiseworthy virtues," these qualities that we have to try and acquire, "and is through service in the cause of universal peace and personal sanctification." So this service in the cause of peace. In a word, nearness to God necessitates sacrifice of self, severance, and the giving up of all to Him. So in summary then, according to the Baha'i teachings, peace and spirituality are strongly interlinked, such that if one wants to progress spiritually, as well as the aspects of prayer and meditation which are there in the writings of Baha'u'llah and other personal practices, one must also be of service to one's fellow human beings. And indeed, the community that Baha'u'llah has created is one that is dedicated to this advancing of peace in the world, and through advancing peace, through being of service to other human beings, one is simultaneously helping oneself to grow spiritually, because that is the path to spiritual progress. So what I've been trying to show is that these two themes of spirituality and peace are in fact interlinked, and that if you are genuinely trying to progress peace in your community, you are at the same time becoming a spiritual person yourself. That's what I've got to say. I was also asked to finish off with a prayer for peace.
Anybody got a question before we pass on to the...
Okay.
You had mentioned that about the elevation of the social role of women, how that increases the chances of war. Could you explain a little bit about how that sequence can happen?
Well, it happens in two ways, really. One is that what we have at the moment is a very sort of hierarchical, patriarchal society, and the more the role of women is advanced, the more you're breaking down that hierarchical society. You're bringing that. So therefore, you're bringing about a more egalitarian society where power and aggressiveness and competitiveness are less highly valued. That's the first way, and the second way is that women throughout the ages have been a voice for peace, if you like, in the world, have tended to be. I mean, not every woman is a peaceful person necessarily, but as a whole, if you take the collectivity of women, then they have tended to be a force for peace in the world. And so consequently, if you increase the social profile of women or increase their social role, then you will be increasing the chances of peace in the world as a whole.
One more very quick one, please. Then we'll have the...
The Baha'i faith is an offshoot of Islam in the same sense that Christianity is an offshoot of Judaism. The Baha'i faith reveres all of the holy books of all of the religions, including, of course, the Quran, therefore, and regards the Quran as the word of God. So therefore, in the same sense that Christians have the old, what they call the Old Testament and what Jews call the Hebrew Bible, as part of their holy scriptures. So therefore we also would reverence the Quran and indeed the Bible and other scriptures of other world religions. But the Baha'i faith regards itself as an independent religion and not a part of Islam. This is a prayer of Abdul Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith. O thou kind Lord, thou hast created all humanity from the same stock. Thou hast decreed that all shall belong to the same household. In thy holy presence they are all thy servants, and all mankind are sheltered beneath thy tabernacle. All have gathered together at thy table of bounty. All are illumined through the light of thy providence. O God, thou art kind to all. Thou hast provided for all, dost shelter all, conferrest life upon all. Thou hast endowed each and all with talents and faculties, and all are submerged in the ocean of thy mercy. O thou kind Lord, unite all. Let the religions agree and make the nations one, so that they may see each other as one family and the whole earth as one home. May they all live together in perfect harmony. O God, raise aloft the banner of the oneness of mankind. O God, establish the most great peace. Cement thou, O God, the hearts together. O thou kind Father, God, gladden our hearts through the fragrance of thy love. Brighten our eyes through the light of thy guidance. Delight our ears with the melody of thy word, and shelter us all in the stronghold of thy providence. Thou art the mighty, the powerful. Thou art the forgiving, and thou art the one who overlooketh the shortcomings of all mankind.